Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Truth on the Tracks. I'm Brandon Turbeville, your host. Tonight is December 14th, 2015, and we have a lot of information to cover tonight. Before we do, I want to remind you that you can catch Truth on the Tracks every Monday night at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time here at ucy.tv. You can access the show's personal webpage at ucy.tv/TT for Truth on the Tracks. Now, we're going to talk a lot about geopolitics tonight. As usual, this is all very important. We are, of course, on the precipice of World War III, thanks to the Anglo-American imperialists who are attempting to overthrow the legitimate, elected, secular government of Bashar al-Assad in Syria. We are also seeing a situation in which one pilot or one special forces soldier can make a judgment call that essentially opens the way to incinerate us all in some type of worldwide conflagration of the thermonuclear variety, in worst-case scenario. Of course, we hope that doesn't happen. Not only do we hope to avoid World War III, we hope to avoid any further imperialism in Syria. So the answer to that is to stop funding terrorists in Syria, to demand that Saudi Arabia stop funding terrorists in Syria, and to demand that Turkey stop supporting terrorists in Syria, that they close the Jarablus corridor, that we work with the Russians, we work with the Syrians to end terrorism, and after that has been accomplished, that we invest heavily in the redevelopment of Syrian society, rebuilding all of the infrastructure that's been destroyed, and promoting scientific development, improvements to the civilian infrastructure, and all of those types of things. And we can get into those solutions later. Just want to remind you that if you want to catch my articles, then you can go to activistpost.com, where most of them come out. You can also go to naturalblaze.com. We'll have some very important articles coming out there pretty soon. But if you're interested in my work specifically, then I would encourage you to go to brandonturbeville.com. That is the website where I repost all of my articles, all of the YouTube videos, all of the archives of this show, and all of the other relevant information. Of course, the books are there. You can click on the Books tab, and you'll find a link to the bookstore. It should be fairly easy. And we should have another book up on Amazon pretty soon. That's moving slower than we'd like, but so many events are taking place right now that we're trying to cover, that we're trying to influence, that it's become somewhat more difficult to get this stuff updated and placed out on the market. Now, speaking of the market, I want to draw your attention to BrandonTurbeville.com. If you'll go to the website on the home page, and indeed on all the pages with the articles that you click on, you'll see at the top right-hand corner a translate page. That's for the readers from overseas who would like to come to BrandonTurbeville.com and read the articles in their home language as best translated by Google, if that does well enough for you. But right underneath that button, you'll find supportBrandonTurbeville.com, and you'll find an Amazon link button right there. It's conspicuous. You'll be able to see it as soon as you get to the webpage. And what this is a way for the listeners to support my work, this radio show, the website, all the books, articles, and that sort of thing, without spending a single extra dime, right? So if you want to support my website and you order off of Amazon, then you can help me out. Just go to my website, go ahead and log on to your Amazon account, and before you add anything into your cart, go click on the Amazon link that is on my website. That's going to bring up a code that'll bring up the Amazon page after you've logged in. Just click on that. The Amazon page will come up, and then you order your item. Just do that as you order, and that's all you have to do. It's not going to cost anything extra. If your item costs $10, it's not going to cost you $10.50. It's not going to cost you $10.01 to support me. I'll make a commission off of the Amazon link. So if you want to support me and you shop on Amazon, then this is this is an option for you. You can support me without spending any extra money, and I'd greatly appreciate it. So we know the holidays are coming up, and a lot of shopping is going to be done online. Then take advantage of it. Just go to the Amazon link, click on it, add the items to your cart, purchase them. You won't notice a difference, but I will. So I would greatly appreciate it if you did that. Now, we're coming close on the holidays, so I should mention some good news, I guess, on the show. We covered back in late October this fluoride-free San Marcos movement. These individuals in San Marcos, Texas, who were organizing a successful petition drive to add the option of dropping water fluoridation from the San Marcos water supply to the ballot back in November. And there were two propositions on the November ballot. One had to do with the elections, and the other had to do with the practice of adding fluoride to drinking water, rather ending the practice of adding fluoride to drinking water. So they got the issue on the ballot, and they worked day and night to educate the voters in San Marcos as to why the issue was important and to why they should defluoridate the water. We had a statement from Sam Brannon of Fluoride Free San Marcos. He says, "There's never been a randomized control trial on this product they put in our water. They don't know for sure if it's doing anything good for us, and they certainly don't know whether or not it is harming us." That was his quote. People have protested the mass medication of the public through drinking water all along, right? The fluoride in tap water, it's been touted as healthy and safe. It's nothing more than the legal, unregulated way for chemical companies to unload their waste, and we pay for that privilege and consume it. You remember last year we had a highly contested Harvard research study that was published in The Lancet that implied that water fluoridation is not only ineffective for your teeth, but it's a neurotoxin associated with ADHD and other neurodevelopmental issues. It's been associated with a significant drop in IQ. That's been repeatedly demonstrated. Fluoride was recently outed as damaging to the thyroid, which that's significant when you're talking about neurodevelopmental problems and the like. So we had most recently, I guess, Scientific Review found that there was a stark correlation between fluoridated water supplies and instances of ADHD diagnosis. So that's pretty interesting. So the only reason such reviews remain speculative, or the study of correlation versus causation, is because fluoride has been an industry science darling from the beginning, and the bias is still there. Unfortunately, that shuts down any real research into the matter, and so the issue often falls on the demands of activists like those in San Marcos as a final resort. So you can find Fluoride Free San Marcos on Facebook, and I do believe that their ballot initiative, not only was it added to the ballot, but this ballot initiative passed. They passed the first citizen-led city charter amendment ever put before voters in San Marcos. To read their statement, it says, "On Tuesday, the people of San Marcos made history. We passed the first citizen-led city charter amendment ever put before voters in this town. We made the conscious decision to stop adding hazardous waste to our public water supply. Some call us radicals, but we know we're right. Some called us gadflies, but we knew we could see this through. We won with 61% in just 6 weeks of campaign time, and our support was very widespread. In fact, we won 18 of the 19 voting precincts in San Marcos." And they go through some of their reasons for success. They said, "We had nearly 40 volunteers working the polls with us on Election Day. We had about a dozen people working the polls with us during early voting. Our volunteers knocked on 2,500 doors in the city at least once. We knocked 1,500 doors at least twice. Believe our issue would be one on the doorstep, and we believe that was proven true. We called more than 1,000 voters at least once. All of this within 6 weeks' time. Super heroic." And we want to congratulate them. We want to congratulate Fluoride Free San Marcos Coalition on their amazing work. And this is the good news, right? So they won. Fluoride will be out. And congratulations to them yet again. And I just read some of the things on air, what they believe is crucial to their success, or was crucial to their success. So maybe if some of the listeners decide to take some action in this regard, or regard to some other issue, then they'll pay attention to that. Now, since we are talking about fluoride, I want to move on to something else. It's interesting in terms of what's considered a drug, what's considered waste, and what's considered deadly. And I want to talk about the marijuana issue, because in 2015, somehow this is still an issue, that the government has the right to protect you from yourself, that the government has a right to declare that a plant that grows in nature is illegal and that you could be sent to prison, right? Because it's protecting you from yourself. If you consume this plant, what we believe can destroy your life, we will destroy your life so you don't destroy your life with this plant. Makes no sense. It's because it's not about even protecting you from yourself. It's about eviscerating your personal liberties and your God-given innate rights that you were born with to consume whatever you damn well please, and that includes plants, of course. So the marijuana issue here in the United States, we have the punitive society, the punishment society. We apparently we incarcerate more people than any country in the world, and we love it as a culture, unfortunately, because there doesn't seem to be any amount of prison time or police presence or state violence that is not acceptable to the American people. That's probably because they've been given police dramas and crime scene dramas and all these types of television programming and essentially perception control, mind control programming through their mainstream media and through the television industry and through Hollywood. So that's one reason why. I want to get off on another tangent. I just want to report this story. The United States, back in late October, announced that it's withholding $5 million worth of drug war aid to Mexico because of repeated human rights violations committed by the Mexican government. We have Jose Miguel Vivanco, this is the executive director of the Americas Division of Human Rights Watch, described the decision as unprecedented. He said the State Department has been, quote, systematically reluctant to use the leverage provided by law. What they have tended to emphasize is keeping the bilateral relationships as the principal objective, and human rights normally takes a back seat, end quote. Well, yeah, of course they do. The United States hasn't been interested in human rights in a very long time. But what's this about? $5 million is only a portion of the aid that the U.S. provides to Mexico to continue fighting this stupid drug war every year. Most of this aid centers around training and equipping Mexican security services and security forces and strengthening its criminal justice system, which means it just pours money into the police state in Mexico. Under the terms of the Merida initiative, they have 15% of the funds allocated for Mexican police and military support. That's supposed to be conditional and tied to improvements in Mexico's human rights record. Again, American police, compared to any other police force, and human rights records, I don't think we want to go down that road, but still, that decision to withhold the $5 million is sending a clear message to Mexico. But what is that message? Right? The message is Americans have to come to grips with the fact that their closest foreign neighbor is actually a third world failed state. It's questionable at best to assume that the State Department has supported bombing and torturing and raping and beheading across the world in the name of democracy, but it's really concerned with human rights and the lives of Mexicans. They don't tend to care about Mexicans any other time. So what this is apparently a warning to Mexico, because the Supreme Court of Mexico several months ago reviewed the country's current prohibition of marijuana, as well as the possibility of legalizing marijuana for medical and recreational use. medical marijuana is currently legal in Mexico, but the black market drug trade in the country is continuing to cause widespread violence, drug cartel activity, gang activity, just as it does in America. But marijuana legalization has been traditionally a very popular concept in Mexico, that people understand the real-life consequences of the drug war and the prohibition because it's hitting them much harder down there. The United Nations, of course, always stepping in to promote communitarianism, uniformity, and what they call harmonization of laws. In other words, the one world government of bureaucracy and control freaks. The United Nations comes in and forces the countries all around the world, including Mexico, to comply with the drug prohibition policy that the U.S. government, the country that imprisons more people than any other country on the face of the planet, and consumes probably more drugs than any country on the face of the planet, it's the policy that they help champion. Now, with a lot of states in the U.S. that are legalizing the plant, Mexico is seeing a window of opportunity to change those laws at home and to keep nonviolent, victimless offenders out of jail and then minimize the violence created by the black market. So on October 28th, the Supreme Court judges in Mexico they voted to decide whether or not the current prohibition on marijuana was unconstitutional. And we need to look back at this result. And it looked pretty good at the time that they would do so, but this cut in aid comes right around the time that these Mexican court judges were going to vote on whether or not to legalize marijuana. So we see the obvious explanation for this is that since the United States is not concerned with human rights anywhere, at home or abroad, that the obvious answer was that they were attempting to simply force the Mexican government to send a warning shot that if you legalize this plant, we can cut so much aid to you. I would encourage the Mexican government to ignore that. The United States is not your friend. The United States is your enemy in this instance. Go ahead and legalize it. You're going to reduce the amount of drug traffic in all actuality, and you don't need the U.S. support. Nationalize your bank, nationalize your central bank, and use that and tell the United States to go jump in the lake. It's time that a lot of countries began to do that. Now, the health care issue, because we've got to move along, we've got to talk about the geopolitics. I want to get into some of the health care issue. Actually, you know what? No. John McCain will have to wait. We'll get into John McCain later. Let's talk about genetically modified regulations, GMO regulations, I guess we should say. The religion of scientism, the trendy worship of science. I guess I could put science in scare quotes here. This is now experiencing phase 2 of any religion. That's the religion phase in which adherents begin to lose sight of what even the originator or focus of their religion stood for, or at least stood against, and now they become focused on promoting or perpetuating and defending the dogma surrounding it. So even the religion of scientism is going through this. The worshippers of dogma and anyone in a lab coat, the white-coated priesthood. So the danger and legitimacy of GMOs is no longer in question for these people. Right? They've latched themselves to the snake oil wagon. Scientists, researchers that are on this bandwagon are no longer interested in determining whether or not it's safe or useful to have GMOs, but they're attempting to develop means to avoid the regulation of their promotion. So we've got research done by scientists at Seoul National University in South Korea as a perfect example. There's a series of experiments in which scientists are now able to edit a genome using viral RNA in a very precise fashion. This is a process known as CRISPR. That's clustered, regularly interspaced, short palindromic repeats. This involves the application to a genome using a bacterium as the vehicle. And that process that was developed by the Seoul researchers involves the introduction of the RNA to the genome without using agrobacterium as the vehicle. So with the new process, the editing of the genome would be the same. Right. In other words, researchers are able to knock out the genes they want to remove. Only the delivery of the technique is slightly different, because CRISPR is traditionally conducted, uses a bacterium vehicle. CRISPR-modified genomes come under GMO regulations, which that's enforced by the Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service of the Agricultural Department. These regulations are applied when a so-called plant pest is introduced into a genome that's pre-existing. The bacterium is what is regulated as the plant pest. Now, with the elimination of the bacterium as the vehicle, the genetic modification process would be able to be conducted without GMO regulations. So essentially, this means that the researchers have discovered a way to genetically modify organisms without having to follow GMO regulations. But what is most concerning about this issue is in this research is not necessarily even the development of the new procedure, but the goals of the research itself, which was the ability to genetically modify an organism without regulation. This is not an assumption made or implied about the motives of the researchers by me or anyone else. It's stated in the research team, by the research team, all of the mainstream reports surrounding it. We've got geneticist Jin Soo Kim. Quote, "In terms of science, our approach is just another improvement in the field of genome editing. However, in terms of regulations and public acceptance, our method could be path-breaking," end quote. Noah Feldman, writing for Bloomberg View, quote, "If this sentence doesn't bother you, it should. The researchers were openly acknowledging that the point of their efforts is to work around existing GMO regulations," end quote. Actually, no, let's hear more from Feldman. "And they might even conceivably be right about the law. In 2011, APHIS issued an official notice that excluded a genetically engineered form of Kentucky bluegrass from its regulatory scope. Its reasoning was that the agency was only authorized to regulate plant pests, which includes bacteria like those usually used to introduce CRISPR, because the genetically engineered bluegrass was created by a different technique that didn't introduce bacteria. APHIS said it wasn't covered," end quote. So there's also the dangers of genetic modification surrounding CRISPR. That doesn't necessarily depend on the use of the bacteria, but what's referred to as the off-target effect. So basically, CRISPR removes genes selected by the researchers, but it can also remove other genes that they didn't intend to remove. In other words, the process is not entirely an exact science, and it can produce unintended and unknown consequences. So researchers have found a way to avoid even the scant regulations that do exist regarding genetic modifications. There's going to be no doubt that major corporations are immediately beginning to take advantage of this research and of the ignorance of the general public, who are going to be the guinea pigs and the hapless consumers. So that's something to look forward to, I guess we should say. Now, we want to mention just a couple more things before we go on to the geopolitics side and try to tackle that. What can we say? Donald Trump. This has been the talk of the last week and a half, I guess we should say. So what is going on with Donald Trump? Well, Donald Trump is a fascist. What else can we say? He's a fascist. If that wasn't made clear over the last week and a half, I don't know what else it can do, what he can do to make it become even more clear. These are policies that are not like Hitler. These are policies that Hitler actually instituted. The banning of Muslims from entering the country, this is stupid, it's misguided, and it's stupid. It's also unconstitutional on a number of levels, and anybody who supports this type of thing has no respect for the Constitution, and you should probably go sit out in the woods with no electrical capabilities for quite some time to get your head together and get out of the fear mode. This is, of course, Islamophobia. We are not a theocracy, dear Christian Republicans, because if we were, we would be like Al-Qaeda, and that's what you're claiming that you don't want to happen. And this is not something that we should we should promote. Now, banning immigration, that's one thing. Saying that we can't have any more immigration for 5 years, some might consider that draconian. I don't. I think that's actually reasonable to say that we've had enough. We've had millions and millions and millions of people pouring over the borders illegally for years, and enough is enough. Time to shut the border down and let us assimilate the people that are here, and then we can get back to the business of orderly, legal immigration. Fine with that. Let's go with it. But saying that we can have some people who can come here and some people who can't simply because of their religion, that's not acceptable in any way. You can't have a religious test for people coming into the country. These are not the types of things that we can support. He also wants more surveillance of mosques. Well, that's the police state. That's the police state that I remember that listeners to the alternative media, specifically certain shows, were opposing after 9/11. And this is the types of things that we saw as indication of not only an Orwellian nightmare, but the death of the U.S. Constitution and the United States in general, the surveillance of certain people with no evidence that they've committed a crime simply because they exist. That's what we opposed, but now a lot of people in the alternative media are supporting it. So that should tell you where their loyalties lie. And we don't support surveillance of mosques without due process of law, without a warrant, without legitimate reasons, without probable cause. That's what we support. If you need surveillance, you get a warrant, you get probable cause, and then we'll talk. But until then, your religious obsessions, your fear, your abject terror, because you've been glued to a television screen and you've been watching Fox News or CNN or the Rush Limbaugh show or something to that effect, that our rights do not take a back seat to your stupidity. And this is the exact same argument that you have to propose with the anti-gun liberals, right? Your fear, the fact that you are pissing your pants because you have been glued to the television for too long, that my rights don't take a back seat to your fear. Well, we're going to use that to the Republicans this time around. Your fear does not overtake my constitutional rights. We've been saying this since 9/11. They seem to not get it. The fact that Trump would say this stuff is not such a big deal. The fact that his supporters would be so enthusiastically in favor of it, and that his poll numbers would actually go up in places like North Carolina after he said it, is what is so much more concerning. The guy has actually said that FDR had the right idea during World War II when he interned the Japanese. So we've got the alternative media jumping on the bandwagon of a guy who wants to have a theocracy, who wants to violate the Constitution, the First Amendment, and a couple of others, who wants to violate the Fourth Amendment with warrantless surveillance without probable cause of specific religious groups of people, and a guy who wants internment camps. So congratulations, alternative media. You have come full circle now. You warned us about the concentration camps, and now you support them. Congratulations. Give yourself a standing ovation for the biggest about face in a long time. Now, enough of Trump. We're done with Trump. We're not endorsing him, obviously. Hillary Clinton is evil, too. We're not endorsing either one of them. In fact, I take this opportunity to remind you that my book, The Difference It Makes, 36 Reasons Why Hillary Clinton Should Never Be President, is available. And it's available at Amazon.com, and you can get it for free on BrandonTurbeville.com to see why the Wicked Witch of the West should never, ever, ever get close to the White House. We should have armed guards outside the White House to make sure that Hillary Clinton doesn't get within 500 feet of it because it's too dangerous for national security. We should ban this woman to Siberia. Now, since we're talking about surveillance, I wanted to bring up one other story. We've never known the European Union for its respect for human rights or civil liberties. It's just not what they do. The European Court of Human Rights has now once again demonstrated that secret hearings and detentions without trial and other violations of individual rights are well within the scope of the European Union. On late October again, October 20th, the ECHR, the European Court of Human Rights in Strasbourg, dismissed a claim by 3 Pakistani students who were detained in the UK for about 2 weeks while UK courts held closed sessions regarding their arrest warrants. The UK courts argued for its secrecy on the grounds of national security. The 3 students, Sultan Sher, Mohammed Rizwan Sharif, Mohammed Umar Farouk, were all arrested, held by police after authorities launched a series of anti-terror raids across northwest England in April of 2009. All 3 of these guys were on student visas. They were held for 13 days. All 3 were released without charge. All 3 of these students were brought before a court 2 times during the process in which warrants for further detention were granted. The students claimed they were denied any open adversarial process, in other words, the ability to challenge the charges leveled against them, and the European Court apparently agreed with them. And the European Court of Human Rights agreed that some evidence being presented against them had been withheld from them. And the court admitted that at least one hearing was even held in closed session for a short time. That one hearing was held in closed session. But they agreed with all that, but they also agreed with the UK. They said that they actually ruled that the UK courts did not violate the rights of these students to lawful detention or in the manner in which the searches took place. So on April 21st, 2009, all 3 of these guys were released without charge, and they were served with deportation orders, returned voluntarily to Pakistan in September of that year. Faris Vahobovic was one of the ECHR judges. He dissented and he said, quote, "I find it unjustified to exclude the applicant and his representative from part of the hearing when this discussion took place, thus removing the possibility that the applicant might dispute the relevance of evidence which was decisive for that extension of detention," end quote. So at least one judge understood the concept of habeas corpus and the ability to respond to the charges made against you by your government. But unfortunately, this judge was a voice crying in the wilderness. But what else could we expect from an institution that's basically part of a greater institution that is about as democratic as the Soviet Union? Of course, we've got a lot of the Islamophobes that would jump up and down and scream with joy that they can now detain British citizens without charge or trial, the ability to challenge their charges, just like we do in America. Isn't it great that we're the land of the free, where all of your rights are gone? Cognitive dissonance is a wonderful thing, is it not? It's just unbelievable. You got a problem with people coming into your country. You shut down immigration. You don't open your borders and then eviscerate rights because you are allegedly concerned about terrorism. Of course, the terrorism is created by Western intelligence agencies, and I've documented that repeatedly on this show in my articles. We're going to go through that again today. Now, the couple of other things I want to get into in terms of geopolitics, I guess. I should bring up this interview with Assad on mid-November. We had the interview with Assad. It was with this organization. I'm trying to find the French magazine Valeurs Actuelles. I probably butchered that pronunciation, but the French magazine did an interview with Syrian President Bashar al-Assad. He responded to a question about Hollande. Hollande stated, even after the Paris attacks, that Bashar al-Assad must step down and relinquish power. Right, and we know that the Paris attacks were engineered by intelligence agencies. I think that's fairly clear. But so we have Hollande saying that we were attacked by ISIS, so the number one enemy of ISIS must step down and relinquish power so we can fight ISIS. Well, that doesn't make any sense on any level, but except when you understand that this is all a propaganda push and a propaganda game. But Assad responded. He says, was Hollande assigned by the Syrian population to speak on their behalf? Good response. No, he wasn't. Hell, he was barely assigned by the French population to speak on their behalf. They hate him, and they should, because he's scum. Now, the interview I've got in my article up on the website, you can find it there. Assad also stated, my message to Hollande and Fabius, be serious when you talk about fighting terrorists. Well, exactly. I agree. We don't have time to go through all of his responses, but we'll go through just a little bit here. He says, again, my message to Hollande and Fabius, be serious when you talk about fighting terrorists. First of all, this message has many aspects. The first part of this message is a question. Are they independent to send them a message they can implement? Actually, the French policy these days is not independent of the American one. This is first. So sending a message will lead nowhere. In spite of that, if I have a hope that there will be some political change in France, the first one is to go back to the real, independent, friendly politics of France toward the Middle East and toward Syria. Second, be away from the American, methodology of double standards. So if you want to support the Syrian people, allegedly, regarding democracy and freedom, it's better to support the Saudi people first. If you had a problem about democracy with the Syrian state, how could you have good relations and friendship with the worst states in the world, the most underdeveloped states in the world, which are the Saudi and Qatari states? So this is contradiction which doesn't give credibility. Third, it's natural for any official to work for the sake and interest of his people. The question that I ask in any message is, did the French policy during the past 5 years bring any good to the French people? What is the benefit? I'm sure the answer is no, and the proof of that answer is what I said a few years ago, that messing with the fault line in Syria is messing with an earthquake that will reverberate in the rest of the world. First of all in Europe, because we are the backyard of Europe, geographically and geopolitically. So that time they said, are you threatening? I didn't, and Charlie Hebdo happened at the beginning of this year. And I said that after that incident, that this is only the tip of the iceberg, and what happened yesterday is another proof. He's talking about the Paris attacks. So they need to change their policy toward the interests of their people, and this is where we're going to have the same interests with the French population, mainly fighting terrorism. So the final message is, be serious when you talk about fighting terrorists. That is my message. Well, there's a lot that he says there, a lot of good quotes that I could go through, but I'm just going to leave this to the listeners, right? We don't have time. My article, French say Assad must go. Assad responds, no thanks, get serious. That's available at BrandonTurbeville.com and, of course, ActivistPost.com. Now, I've been posting a number of articles by Afra Dagher. She is a political analyst that is currently residing in Syria. You will remember her from her numerous appearances here on my show. She's a regular guest. She is a good friend, and we often make videos and do interviews here on this show to discuss the situation in Syria that she is witnessing firsthand. And she's a regular guest on places like RT and Press TV as well. So I've been posting a number of her articles up at BrandonTurbeville.com. Now, Afra received a personal report from a Lebanese journalist by the name of Hossein Mortada. This guy is the director of the Information Center for Studies and Documentation, and he has provided information that has been corroborated and proven to be true time and time again. This is serious stuff. Now, Mortada provided details about one of the individuals who carried out the Paris attack on Saturday, November 13th, with the rest of his crew. And this guy's name is Abu Talha al-Jazeera, or as al-Jazari. That's another thing, the transliteration of Arabic is often a problem, but essentially al-Jazari means Algerian. And so this is Abu Talha, the Algerian, basically. Abu Talha was a French national. He'd been trained in the occupied Golan Heights, along with a number of his crew who helped carry out the Paris attacks. And all of the terrorists involved with the Paris attacks were European nationals. They were previously fighting in Syria along the al-Nusra front with the al-Nusra front, and then they moved to Raqqa to join the ISIS fighters there. I could point out a number of things here, right? These guys are terrorists, and they managed to come back to the police state that is France with no problem. They could come and go as they please. But if you're a Frenchman, then you are subjected to intense scrutiny if you're trying to do that. Also, of course, we would be remiss in our duties if we did not point out the benefits of multiculturalism in France. Enjoy that. Now, the terrorists involved with the Paris attacks, European nationals, they moved to Quneitra, they moved then to Dara, and then their last station was in Israel, at a site called Beit Zora, which they have been trained at by the Israeli Mossad. They were sent to France just 6 months before the Paris attack incident. So the questions here are, how could a terrorist group violate secure places like stadiums or concert halls without any assistance from foreign intelligence? This is what Afra is asking. And her second question is France ready to designate those fighters as moderate rebels, as it is their title in Syria? Now, what I will say, the shootings and attacks at the concert hall, they may not have been sophisticated, right? This is not, there's the question of sophistication and the question of coordination. And then there's the question of direction, right? Sophistication, this was not, because this was not 9/11. This was not placing bombs inside buildings. This was suicide bombings and shootings, which are quite common in France, but you're not told that. So the other question is coordination, and this was clear, right? There was clear coordination between the participants. And then there's the case of direction, and I think the fact that these individuals had all been watched by the intelligence agencies, they'd been arrested and released, even for murder, all of this is pointing to the false flag nature. Of course, the killing of many of the participants who knew about this as well. All of this is pointing to the false flag. Now, her second question, is France ready to designate those fighters as moderate rebels, as is their title in Syria? Well, isn't it time to do that, France? Aren't these relatively moderate rebels? They didn't need anybody's heart. They should be relatively moderate, right? Aren't they activists? Aren't they democracy lovers? Aren't they democracy activists? Come on, what's the problem? In Syria, these people are freedom fighters. In France, they're terrorists. Does this designation suddenly change when they cross a border? Of course not. But in the minds of the French government, or at least in the propaganda productions of the French government and the NATO governments, then that's exactly what happens. Now, the U.S. started training these terrorists in Jordan. They called them the Syrian Democratic Army at the time. They also called them some of the dissenters, the Free Syrian Army. Hossein Mortada was informed by his source that these guys that were in the Paris attacks were a part of that Syrian Democratic Army that were being trained in Jordan. There is that, right? All of this stuff trained in Israel, and that receives no press at all. Now, the question of the Russian jet being shot down again, this is escalating. We had Russia imposing sanctions upon Turkey, a number of sanctions. These are not drastic sanctions, but they're sanctions enough to hurt. And then we see Russia deploying the S-400 anti-aircraft missiles in Syria. So this is Putin has stated that the armed forces have been directed to deal strongly and quickly with any force that threatens the Russian military forces present in Syria. In other words, if there's a plane that's threatening a Russian plane, shoot it down. Deal with it immediately, and do so with strength. It's a good idea. It's a good idea because you have situations with what Turkey did over a week ago when they shot the Russian jet down, but now we're seeing the tensions between the two. Again, the idea of shooting planes down, by the way, I say it's a good idea because at some point the Russians are going to have to demonstrate that they cannot be shot down and simply move on and avoid responding. the Russians are going to have to show NATO that they are not a paper tiger themselves, that they are not there to be shot out of the skies and to be abused, as NATO has done to the Syrian military, without little response. It's going to have to become so expensive and so costly to the NATO forces that they stop doing this, that they stop poking Russia. Unfortunately, when that happens, we are very close to World War III. So we have the moral high ground belongs to the Russians, but unfortunately, if someone doesn't back down, we very well may have a nuclear war on our hands. Now, the question of how is Turkey responding to the sanctions? It appears that they are closing the Bosphorus Strait to Russian ships. We've got this report from Sputnik News, and it says, quote, "In a clear violation of international norms, Turkish authorities have created hurdles for Russian vessels passing through the Bosphorus Strait. As a result, dozens of Russian ships have been waiting for hours to obtain the green light from Turkey for passage," the media report said. RA Novosti quoted Viktor Kravchenko, former chief of staff of the Russian Navy, as saying that a possible unilateral closure by Turkey of the Bosphorus Strait for Russian ships would be out of line with international law. Turkey will not close the strait to Russian vessels en route to Syria because it would be a violation of international law and the Montreux Convention in particular, a document that was signed by most countries at the time, he said. All right, this Montreux Convention is established in 1936. The full title is the 1936 Montreux Convention on the regime of the Straits, and this convention, this agreement governs the passage of ships that are both naval and civilian through the Dardanelles and the Bosphorus. And Article 2 of that agreement says that, quote, "Merchant vessels shall enjoy complete freedom of transit and navigation in the straits by day and by night under any flag and with any kind of cargo without any formalities," end quote. So small and medium naval warships and vessels must be permitted to pass through the strait as well, not just civilian ships. They must be permitted to pass through the strait during times of peace. Black Sea powers are able to sail any class of ship through the waterway during times of peace. During times of war, the discretion is left up to the Turkish government. Now, in 1994, Turkey unilaterally declared a new maritime traffic regulations for the straits, and this included several restrictions on the passage of foreign vessels. We also had an incident in the Dardanelles Straits where a Turkish submarine was spotted near a Russian vessel, and this was Itar-Tas reporting, quote, "Earlier, Turkey's daily Milliyet said that a Turkish submarine earlier in the day encountered a large cargo and passenger transport ship of the Russian Navy, the Auza, when it was passing through the Dardanelles Strait from the Aegean Sea to the Sea of Marmara. The Russian ship was escorted by a Turkish Coast Guard boat just as the protocols require. The Turkish submarine appeared near it at the exit to the Sea of Marmara. The submarine was on the move in a surface position. It passed by the Russian transport ship several hundred meters away in the opposite direction towards the Aegean Sea," the Daily said. So despite the obvious tensions, it seems that neither side is attempting to make a major ordeal out of the submarine in the Dardanelles, but the Bosphorus is another story, and apparently that remains closed. That's going to be a much different story. So both sides, in terms of the submarine, are downplaying the incident, but the Bosphorus is not likely to be downplayed. Russia would still be able to deliver weapons and troops to Syria if their access to the straits were denied, but it would be forced to sail around Gibraltar, which is about a 13 to 14-day trip, as opposed to through the straits, which is about a 4-day trip. So that's something that could eventually cause more problems in that area. Of course, now we had this major issue on December the 7th or December 6th, I believe, the evening of December 6th of this year, we had 4 U.S.-led coalition warplanes launching 9 rockets on one of the Syrian army locations in Deir al-Sur, in the province of Deir al-Sur. That happened on December 6th. The attack cost the lives of 3 Syrian soldiers. They injured more than 13 others. It destroyed a number of military vehicles, armored vehicles, machine guns, and other kinds of ammunition belonging to the Syrian military. The Syrian Foreign Ministry has stated that they consider this to be an aggressive act, an obstruction of the Syrian army's efforts in fighting terrorists. The Syrian Foreign and Expatriate Ministry addressed this position in 2 different messages to the United Nations United Council. On October the 10th, remember, 2 U.S.-led coalition F-16 aircraft violated the airspace of Aleppo province and bombed 2 power plants, causing a number of power outages there and leaving the Syrian people without power, not ISIS, of course. We should go into some detail here on that. Now, this question now begs what's going to happen with Russia, but it also shows that the anti-ISIS coalition is actually anti-Syria coalition. We have the number. I made a mistake. I said 3 Syrian soldiers. I believe that number had gone up to 4. Colonel Steve Warren, the coalition spokesman, has said that the Syrian reports were wrong, that the United States didn't conduct any airstrikes in that part of Deir el-Sur, but he was later forced to admit that the airstrikes did take place in the region, but he said they were about 55 kilometers away. So the duplicity of the United States in this coalition need to be noted, since the U.S. has in the past claimed that Assad was, massacring innocent civilians, engaging in chemical weapons attacks, indiscriminately barrel bombing civilian areas, all that kind of stuff. All those claims have been thoroughly debunked, and they've been proven to be the handiwork of Western-backed terrorists themselves. So the track record of the U.S. here is dirty, to say the least, especially when it comes to the events in Syria. It should be noted, of course, that the province in which the attack occurred, Deir el-Sur province, that's largely controlled by ISIS. And what the United States and its pathetic anti-Syria coalition has done has effectively weakened the Syrian military presence in the area that is largely controlled by ISIS. That's creating a situation in which ISIS is much more likely to gain full control of Deir el-Sur. In addition to that, the province has significant strategic importance, since the area also contains a number of oil fields controlled by ISIS and used by ISIS to provide supplemental funding. And isn't that interesting? The Russians, the United States bombs Syrian civilian infrastructure and the Syrian military, claiming that they're bombing ISIS, but they don't bomb the oil trucks. They don't bomb actual ISIS fighters. The Russians come in and they start bombing all of those things, and the United States has to play catch-up. They go out and they say they're going to bomb some trucks. They let everybody know to get out of the trucks, to get away. You got 45 minutes. Then they bomb some trucks, just a few, claim they ran out of ammunition, go back to the base, and use footage of the Russian bombing campaign to show that they bombed ISIS oil trucks, because they're playing catch-up in the propaganda game. Now, they went to Deir el-Sur and they bombed the Syrian military. Okay, that's what happened. The Syrian military has been notoriously hesitant to admit that they've actually been bombed. In any other case, they don't want the population to lose faith, right? So they're not going to admit that they were attacked. But in this instance, they are admitting they were attacked, and I think we can believe them. So why didn't the U.S. coalition forces bomb the oil wells that are controlled by ISIS, right? Because that's how they're funding themselves. Why didn't they bomb those oil wells? It's because the U.S. is supporting ISIS. They don't want to bomb ISIS. They want to continue using ISIS against Assad, against Iran, against Russia. And that is the issue. If they wanted to destroy ISIS, they'd work with Assad, not bomb him. they would shut down the Jarablus corridor, not do everything in their power to keep it open. So that is the dangerous game. So we're all waiting now on the Russian response. What are the Russians going to do if the United States continues bombing the Syrian military? What are the Russians going to do if Turkey continues to shoot down Russian jets? We are not in a situation that is conducive to peace. Now, a couple of other things, because we're running out of time. We've got to do this as quickly as possible. I want to introduce to you a new writer, Chris Veritas, who's been writing satire pieces and still does write satire pieces, has submitted a number of articles. They've been published at Activist Post. I'd like to draw your attention to his work. Article Beware the Media Industrial Complex is up at BrandonTurbeville.com. It's an excellent article, and just go check it out. Check out his work if you can. Now, the other questions that we have here. We have the agreement by John Kerry, and he's been instrumental in this, I guess we should say, with Turkey. It's a U.S.-Turkey agreement, joint operation to shut off Turkey's border with Syria to prevent terrorism. And we have Kerry saying the entire border of northern Syria, 75% of it has now been shut off, and we are entering an operation with the Turks to shut off the other remaining 98 kilometers. He didn't elaborate as to what form the operation is going to take or when it would take place. He didn't mention whether or not U.S. troops would be deployed in order to take part in that operation. But it doesn't matter, because we know what this is, right? We know that the idea of shutting down the border is a cover, because what they're trying to do is keep that Jarablus corridor open. They're going to put, they're attempting to put Turkish military forces on one side, possibly two, American military forces on the Syrian side, and then use it as a de facto buffer zone, and then to use American forces as essentially human shields, because if the Syrian military, the Russians bomb it, they can always claim that they bombed American soldiers and then whip the American war population up into a fury and then justify a full-scale invasion. So that is the issue happening there. Of course, we've got the announcement made by the U.S. military and the U.S. Department of Defense, the Pentagon essentially, that a number of other special operations forces are going to be sent to Iraq. And Abadi, the Prime Minister of Iraq, has said no. He said no a few times, but it doesn't seem to be getting the message across. The Pentagon continually announces that these forces are going to be sent to Iraq. And Abadi has even stated that the Iraqis will fight these special forces soldiers if need be, because they do not accept the role of foreign soldiers on Iraqi territory. Okay, well, the Pentagon's still going to put them there anyway, and that shows you the level of tension that's shaping up between the United States and Iraq, and of course the Iranian influence plays a role there. Ladies and gentlemen, we're out of time. We're going to have to pick all this up again next week. This has been Truth on the Tracks. I'm Brandon Turbeville. We'll see you next week.
This is Ozzy Skateboard, and you're listening to UCY.TV.